Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Session 6 of the War in the Ring class, our most recent Mythgard Academy class. I guess it's always true that whatever class we're doing is our most recent Mythgard Academy class. Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here. Sorry I'm a few minutes later than I normally am. I was out this evening beating people up, and I'm late coming back. So, karate class tonight, and I gave it to him tonight, but I really did. But I'm late, so sorry about that. Anyway, so we're going to do Faramir tonight, and I love watching this unfold. It is so much fun. To me, it is one of the most rewarding elements of reading the history of the Lord of the Rings series. To see these times when you can see the story begin, like the moments when the story as Tolkien is discovering it step by step, and this moment when all of a sudden, boom, like Faramir becomes Faramir, right? It's so neat, and I love seeing where that takes him in what is clearly a very unexpected kind of direction. So anyway, I'm excited to do that. Oh, and Vince, Weichi-Ryu karate. It's an Okinawan style. It's much like, though not identical to, Mr. Miyagi's karate style. But almost my black belt graduation, actually. I'm getting my black belt in a few weeks. In what is going to be a very big week. That is the first full week of May. Which reminds me, tomorrow, speaking of the first full week of May, tomorrow night, I'm going to be doing a special session. I'm going to be doing sort of to call it emergency, makes it sound like, it's something bad. It's not something bad. It's a special, unexpected, catastrophic even, State of the University address that I'm going to be doing. I've got some big updates about Signum University because some super exciting things have been going on here behind the scenes. So I wanted to share that with you and let you guys know what's happening. So that's going to be tomorrow night, Thursday night, April 6th. Thursday night, April 6th at 9:30 p.m. And I have a link here. Let me post that link in both places so that those of you who are here with us live can have that. I'm posting that to the chat in GoToWebinar there, and I'm going to post it here in the Twitch chat as well, so that you guys can have that there. So that's the registration link for our special session tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I know that many of you have been following with interest the career of Signum University, which has been a pretty remarkable career to this point, and we're coming up on a super important moment in that career. So I wanted to share that with you guys, and I'm really excited. So, Craig, yes, no, it wasn't just you. I did have to cancel class last week, and my only excuse is that it's directly connected with the exciting announcements I have. I had to cancel because I spent the entire day, the day that I usually spend preparing for class, up in Concord, New Hampshire, in the state capital, talking to the Department of Education. So, and actually it was really cool because, I came home from Concord, and I'm like, okay, let me see if I can try to get stuff ready for class. And then I went to prepare for class, and that's when I noticed that, of course, as you may have noticed as you were preparing for class last week, I had only one chapter scheduled, and it's like 6 pages long. It's like a teeny tiny chapter. Well, of course, when I originally made up the schedule, I said to myself, I thought pretty plausibly, right? Well, surely I'm going to be way behind by the time we get to week 5, right? So, so I was looking, I'm like, should I do that chapter plus Faramir on the same night? And I'm like, no, I'm going to be so far behind. I'll just do the Herbs and Stewed Rabbit chapter to give me a chance to catch up, right? And then we'll be caught up when we get to the Faramir chapter. But of course, unbelievably, we were caught up, right? So I'm like trying to cram and seeing if I can make class happen last week anyway, and so then I look at this and I'm like, a 6-page chapter? I'm like, that's like barely even enough for a class, and so I totally pulled an Aragorn. I'm like, I shall take this short chapter as a sign and cancel class tonight. So I think it was. That was that was fine. So I apologize for that, but we're back this week. One last thing I wanted to mention quickly, just sort of on a personal note, and something I wanted to share with you guys. I'm looking at my attendee list here. Oh, she is here. Takako, you're here. I wanted to thank you. So Takako, who is here with us today, sent me a wonderful present, which arrived in the mail today, Takako. She sent me a copy of the Japanese translation of my book. You might have seen me post this on Twitter, but if you haven't seen it, it is worth looking at. This cover of my Exploring the Hobbit book is so beautiful. I just can't get over how beautiful this cover is. It is like far and away. It's not only by far the best cover my book had in any publication or translation of it, but this is one of the coolest Tolkien covers I've seen. Period. This is just awesome. So thank you so much. The Japanese publisher never got around to sending me a copy of this, and it is just beautiful. Maybe someday I will learn to read it there. Takako, it's pretty. So thank you very much for this. I am so excited to have my own copy of that. It is really beautiful. Anyway, okay. So, thanks everybody for joining us. Let us get down to business now. Okay, I'm ready. Here we go. The ambush in Ithilien. So we begin with, it's interesting to me to learn, as Christopher says, that the passage at the beginning, this was a place he had a really hard time moving on from. Right? Tolkien described the process of writing the beginning of the Ithilien section, like that was, kind of labored, that he really was sort of having a hard time with that. And we saw him kind of laboring over the geography, right? That they... he spent so much time, as we looked at in the last session, deciding like where exactly is Minas Morgul and which one are the relevant towers, and is it up or is it down, and how far down are they going, and we got the crossroads, but is that across from Osgiliath, or how does that work? That when it came to actually describing them, you'll remember Christopher mentions this one note where he decided, like, no, wait, I've got to go back and make that more deep. He was just kind of shoving them along the road, like, and so then they went south for a while. And anyway, then they get to the crossroads, and he's like, no, more needs to happen, right? We need to spend some time in this experience of Ithilien. Okay. Yeah, all right, so let's read some of his first drafting here. And this, by the way, I think is... Well, as outlines go, as sort of brainstorming goes, this is a very Tolkien piece of brainstorming, right? After so much labor and peril, the days they spent on it seemed almost a rest. In Gollum's, that is on the road, I assume. In Gollum's reckoning, it was some 20, changed from some other figures, leagues from the Morannon to the outer wards of Minas Morgul, maybe more. Notice how his uncertainty about the geography is affecting him here. And I would just add briefly, again, that's kind of, it's interesting because that's a bit of a departure, right? We've noticed many times before that Tolkien tends to do story first, right? And then he sort of fills in and sorts out the geography afterwards. And in a sense, of course, that's what's happening here. I guess you could sort of see it in a few different stages, right? First, he has the general outline. Like, he knows Gollum's going to take him to Cirith Ungol. Cirith Ungol is going to be next to Minas Morgul, so they're going to go near Minas Morgul, but they're no longer going to go into it. Probably there's the Tower of Cirith Ungol now probably exists in Tolkien's plan, and they're going to go through the crossroads first. So he knows the outline of what they're going to do, basically, right? And then of course we saw him sorting out the geography. Now he's got to bring the two of them together, right, to sort of marry the story and the geography, and that marriage seems to be sort of off to a slightly rocky start here. Anyway, okay. Gollum finds food. Night of full moon, they see a white something far away up in the dark shadow of the hills to the left, at the head of a wide reentrant. Valley, Minas Morgul. Next night they come to the crossroads, and a great stone figure, something back to Ithilien, which is Osgiliath. Remember, he was going back and forth between Ithilien and Osgiliath for the name of that city. Struck out Sarn Ubed, Enin Aran. Tower Toralt struck out Sarn Torath, Anon Torath, Aranath, reminding Frodo of the kings at Sarn Aranath, or Sarn Ubed. But his head was struck off, and in mockery some orcs had set something, a clay ball, something, the red eye was something painted over. Yes, Arthur, I do assume that it's the statue whose head is struck off and not Frodo's, though I agree it's slightly hard to tell. But technically the nearest antecedent to his head there is in fact Frodo. But anyway, of course, I assume you see what I find so delightfully Tolkienian about this. Of course, we see the shape of it, which is so familiar to us, right? Where, his outlines seem to go in one of two ways, right? Either he starts off in prose and then he begins to get some ideas and he dissolves into outline and just notes, right? Which is what happens here. Or very commonly, he'll start off doing notes and then he transitions into prose and starts doing full dialogue, right? We see both of those things happening a lot. But of course, the way that this just dissolves into this series of names, right? And you can almost hear him beginning to sort of feel out, almost sort of sound out or like taste these different names, right? Sarnel Ubed, Enin Aram, Tower Toralt, Sarn Torath, Anon Torath, Aranath, Sarn Aranath, Sarn Ubed, right? It's like all these different versions, so similar, right? And yet sort of turning around, and halfway through, I am lost as to like which names are supposed to be applied to what things. I'm not even sure what we're talking about by the time we get to Aranath there at the end, right? Yeah, Josiah calls it an all-you-can-pronounce Elvish buffet. Yeah, it really is. It really is like that. It's but I think again this is a neat little glimpse at how important I think the names are to him and the kind of role that the names seem to play, how he sort of is interrupting his flow, not just in randomly like I want to kind of think about names here, but it seems to be an important way of understanding, right, what's going on here. Okay, so then we get the idea about the rabbits, right? With all this in his mind, he turned to look for Gollum. Gollum was crawling away through the bracken. "Hi," said Sam. "Where are you going? Hunting? Now look here, my friend. You don't like our food, but if you could find something fit for a hobbit to eat, I'd be grateful." Yes, yes. Gollum brings back 2 rabbits. Angry at fire, A. Fear, B. Rage at nice juicy rabbits being spoiled. Pacified by Frodo, promise of fish. Night of full moon and vision of Anduin. 3rd night. They do not reach the crossways. Trying to hasten their journey by day through wood. They come to crossways and peer at it out of thicket. The Headless King with a mocking head made by orcs and scrawls on it. That night they turn left. Vision of Minas Morgul in the moon, high up in Reentrant. Okay, so notice that. Notice the sequence of things, right? That is the sequence of the things that Tolkien discovers. The first thing he discovers about Ithilien, and I don't count Minas Morgul, right, because that was part of the whole geographic scheme that he worked so hard on in the previous, what was earlier in the same chapter, right, when he wrote it, but previous chapter for us. But in Ithilien, what's the very first thing that comes up in Ithilien? The very first thing that comes up in Ithilien is the crossroads with the king, and the whole vision of the king, or almost the whole vision of the king, is there from the beginning, right? The ancient stone statue with its head lopped off, and the orc mockery, and the whole thing covered with orc graffiti. That's there. That's like the first thing that he thinks of in Ithilien. It's the first thing that he discovers in Ithilien, and that I find really interesting, to think of the primacy of that. Seems to me very suggestive. And here's one of the primary reasons why I find that so suggestive is that let's not forget that Aragorn becoming king has not been the central story all the way through or anything like, right? It's a fairly newish concept that Aragorn is going to become king at the end. Even when he was going through the ending of the story before, it didn't necessarily include Aragorn becoming king. We're definitely moving more strongly in that direction, right? As they come down here in Ithilien and they're about to cross over into Minas Morgul and further into Mordor, before they leave, before they turn their backs on Gondor, they see this other ancient Gondorian statue, and you can see the connection that he's making between this and the Argonath, right? Or what will eventually be called the Argonath, however many things it's being called right now. So we have this symbol, representative, really more than just a symbol, of the ancient might and splendor of Gondor and power of Gondor, but it's decapitated, right? The king has no head. It's a ruler without a head. The head of the king has to be restored. And so this already, whether or not he was consciously working it in this direction at this point, whether this was what was in his head, we don't know. But we can already see how that's beginning to work as a symbol, as a metaphor for Aragorn. Like the ancient statue with no head, right, is like the kingdom of Gondor, right, with no king. The kingdom of Gondor that kicked out its Númenórean rulers long ago. It needs to be restored, right? And now we're beginning to see that coming more centrally into view. So again, that's object number one, right? That's the very first element of the Ithilien story that comes into focus. The second, the rabbit stew, right? Sam cooking his rabbit stew. And I'm not sure, this outline, which is the first suggestion of that, is not really revealing it's not really revealing about the function of this story in regard to like that is the function of the rabbit story. Like, what is the purpose? What does it do? Like, why is it that? What is the core idea? I don't think it's simply, there's too much detail here. The number of rabbits that are being cooked, and besides which, I can't think of a single other example, a single other moment when we are told what they cooked and ate in their camp while they were traveling. Like, ever since they left Rivendell, I don't think we've been told even once what was the food. I mean, other than Limbus, obviously, like what was the food they were eating. So just the mere fact that we have this whole scene with the finding of, the catching of the rabbits and the making of the stew. Notice what we don't have here, right? What he does not point to is, and which is such a central feature of the story as it's finally represented in the published text, is that moment of tenderness with Sam and Frodo, right? That the whole Sam is driven first to think of the rabbit stew for his concern for Frodo. He looks too drawn and thin, right? And he wants to cook him a nice stew because he hasn't had a decent meal in a long time. That's what motivates him to begin. And we get, of course, that, that's the, Frodo, or him contemplating Frodo and openly considering how much he loves him and everything. It's a moment of very great tenderness from Sam to Frodo, but he doesn't point to that at all. Now, I'm not saying that can't possibly be that can't possibly be in Tolkien's head here behind this outline, but he doesn't mention it, right? And normally, I don't know, I would have expected him, if that was the core thing he was going after, right? If that was the main thing that he had in mind, I think he would have mentioned it in some way, right? but he doesn't. And notice Frodo seems to be awakened there. The concept of Frodo sleeping seems to be not there, as Frodo is there to pacify Gollum when Gollum freaks out about the fire. So as far as I can see, just based on what we get of it here, the central point of the central Coney concept is the relationship with Gollum. Right? I mean, that's the thing that really gets emphasized. Sam's approach to Gollum, Gollum's willingness, right? Yes, gets its own little paragraph there, right? And then Gollum's reaction to the fire and his pacification by Frodo. So the sort of the three-way dynamics between Sam, Gollum, and Frodo seem to be the thing that at least I would say that's what this outline is most interested in, right? Whether or not that was primary in Tolkien's head, I don't know. But that certainly seems to be something that he really had in mind centrally here. Okay. Now the Headless King. Oh yeah, Kate Neville made a really great comment about the Headless King. Kate says that the image, that is this image of the Headless King, came before Aragorn was explicitly attached to it, right? Like the Gondorians appeared before Faramir. Yeah, exactly. And of course, we often see that kind of thing. Yeah, James, I also like how Tolkien says he's got to research how to cook rabbit stew, right? So that so that Sam can know how to do it. But see, James, that's exactly it, right? Was there any other point where Tolkien had to do culinary research for their camp food? I don't think so, right? Again, clearly he's making a bigger deal of the cooking of the Coney. But the initial emphasis here is all on the fire and Gollum's reaction to the fire, which is interesting. And Stephen, that's a really great question about the vision at the end. Vision of Minas Morgul in the moon, high up and reentrant. And Stephen is asking, does it just mean that they see it? Or, like they have a vision, that there's something sort of more portentous about that? I think kind of both, in a sense, Stephen. That is to say, I think that they see it, is what it means. But I think that is kind of significant phrasing. Vision of Minas Morgul in the moon, right? That's significant, right? It's the Tower of the Moon, right? But Minas Morgul in the moon. It's not Minas Ithil in the moon. So vision of Minas Morgul in the moon. There seems to me, the way that he describes that leads me to believe, or leads me to theorize anyway, that sentence, vision of Minas Morgul in the moon, high up and reentrant. That sounds like one of those landscape painter moments, right, where Tolkien is really visually picturing this particular scene that he's describing. I think he's got a very clear picture in his head of what that looks like. Minas Morgul in the moon, high up in the reentrant. And so I suspect that his thought there is that while it is just catching a sight of it, his description of it is probably going to convey more than that, right? That it's going to be a meaningful sight of it, right? Okay, good. Let's keep going. At the end of the episode of Stewed Rabbit, there is a brief sketch in the manuscript of the story to come, written in pencil so rapid that I cannot make all of it out. But it can seem that Sam finds that Gollum is not there. He puts out the fire and runs down to wash the pans. He hears voices and suddenly sees a couple of men chasing Gollum. Gollum eludes their grasp and vanishes into a tangled thicket. They go on up the hill, and Sam hears them laugh. "Not an orc," says one. Sam creeps back to Frodo, who has also heard voices and hidden himself, and they see many men creeping up towards the road. And then skipping a little bit, this is a direct quotation. A slain Tirith Man falls over bank and crashes down on them. Frodo goes to him, and he cries, "Orc!" and tries to something, but falls dead, crying, "Gondor!" The harried men drive Gondorians down hill. The hobbits creep away through thickets. At last they climb tree, see Gondorians fight and win finally. At dusk, Gollum climbs up to them. He curses Sam for bringing enemies. They dare not go back to road, but wander on through the wild glades of Ithilien that night. See full moon. Meet no more folk. strike the road to Osgiliath far down, and have to go back long detour east, deep Ilex woods. Gollum goes on by day. Evening of third day, they reach Crossways, see broken statue. Okay, yeah, good. Oh, good. Yeah, Brianna is pointing out that, of course, that there is a really nice painting in the Two Towers of, Brianna says there's a nice sort of painting in the Two Towers film of the moon over this region. So it's nice that it actually became a painting in the end. Yeah, I agree. Arthur, I also don't ever remember seeing the phrase Tirith Man before. That seems to be new here. And Lee, that's really fascinating, isn't it? Lee points out the parallel between them climbing up a tree to escape this battle, and of course Bilbo and the dwarves climbing up the tree in out of the frying pan into the fire. Though I guess no harm comes of it here, right? So here it seems to be the good way to go here. Okay, so but Kate, exactly. As Kate points out, we see it again, right? This image that is, sort of central to this scene, but later on it's going to take on a different significance, and that is soldier falling down and dying right in front of them, right? That's a moment, and that seems to be the central moment here, right? So we've had, image number, Ithilien moment number one, the Headless King, right? The statue at the crossroads. Ithilien moment number two, the cooking of the rabbit stew. Ithilien moment number three, the fight between the Harad men and the Gondorians, right? The Tirith men. And this is one of which they are merely the spectators. So it appears that the entire point of this, as far as we can see, is like they're in danger, right? We see them coming close to battle, right? Coming close to combat. So like the war is threatening them, right? And like directly, like they threaten to be caught up in the war, but they're not personally connected to it at all. That is, they don't interact with it other than briefly with the dying dude, right? But he crashes down on them, like, very close to them, right down there among them. I don't know what he was trying to cry. I'm not sure. Orc, whether that was, he was saying something else and couldn't quite get it out. But or whether he's warning them, or whether he thinks they're orcs. I'm not really sure exactly how to take that exactly. And Yana, that's a great question. I was thinking the same thing just now. Tirith Man. Minas Tirith, of course, means the Tower of Guard. So does Tirith Man mean that he's a guard, like he's a guard man, or does it mean a man of Minas Tirith? I was assuming it means man of Minas Tirith, just as we have Harad men and Tirith men, right? I assume. But it is kind of interesting, right? Like Tirith Man would be a perfectly fine way to just say, oh, he's a guard, right? It's fine. So Mike, the Tirith Man seems to think that Frodo's an orc. Because the dudes who are chasing Gollum conclude that he's not an orc. And apparently they think that's funny and leave, right? So we have Gollum being threatened by them, but Gollum escaping, the hobbits never being detected, except for briefly by the dying dude, and who like cries out his battle cry as he dies, and then that's it. But he seems, I think, to mistake them for orcs. I'm not really sure. But Mike, orcs are smaller than men, I think. Remember, the hobbits are getting mistaken for orcs relatively frequently, or at least lots of people rule out orcs when they see them. Right. The Rangers are, the Rangers of Ithilien are like, no, not orcs. Right. And Treebeard also, right, would have mistaken them for little orcs. So yeah, it's orcs are not as and remember, there are also references to the fact that some of the great uruks are nearly man high, right? So that the goblins, the other smaller orcs are, like the Misty Mountain orcs are smaller, right? So yeah, presumably they are maybe not quite hobbit size, but it is their first thought. They see strange diminutive creatures in the bushes, and so, poor mortally injured dude mistakes them for orcs. Like, I think he can be forgiven for that. And yes, Stephen, it is one of the things that makes the Uruk-hai special, is that they're basically the size of men. Yeah, which is unusual. Absolutely. Okay. Right. Okay. So this battle then is the next thing, and so I talked about the war impinging on the back. Again, no, it's impersonal, right? They don't interact. The first impulse here is not to have them interact with it at all, with any of the soldiers, with any of the battle, and it's interesting, therefore, that what we get is just a battle scene from a distance, right? And they can identify the good guys and the bad guys. Like, they know the guy who fell and died right in front of them was a good guy because he shouted Gondor, right? So that kind of gave that away. But all they're doing is just watching men kill each other from a distance. We just have sort of battle and death suddenly bursting out of the bushes, and like dead men literally falling on them, right? Again, it's that sense of the war is breaking out right now. Battle is happening all around them. So it seems to be kind of initially just establishing that atmosphere, right? Yeah, good. Yeah, Druid's Fire. I was also like, the only other word I could think of too that he could be saying that gets cut off is orchestra, but that really, I can't make that work. Yeah. Then he relatively quickly decides, no, they should interact with them, right? They should, orchids. That's true. That's good, Mike. Yeah. Orchids, because Sam is so beautiful that he just mistakes him for an orchid. I think that's really good. But anyway, okay. So Tolkien relatively quickly decides, no, they should interact with them, right? That the men of Gondor should not just be seen from a distance. We should get Frodo and Sam interacting with the men of Gondor. The story of the ambush of the Southron men thus seems at this stage to have had no sequel. But from the point where this outline begins, when Sam calls to Gollum that there is some rabbit left if he wants to change his mind, he finds that he has disappeared. The final form of the story, partly extant in rough drafting, was achieved without hesitation, with, however, one major difference. The leader of the Gondorians was not Faramir, brother of Boromir. At this time, he was Falborn, son of Anborn, and remained so in the manuscript. Mablung and Damrod, the two men who were left to guard Frodo and Sam, told them that Falborn was a kinsman of Boromir, and that he and they were rangers of Ithilien, for they were descended from folk who lived in Ithilien at one time before it was overrun. For the rest, Falborn's conversation with Frodo and Sam proceeds almost exactly as does that with Faramir in the Two Towers. Mablung and Damrod used sometimes the common speech, but after the manner of older days, sometimes some other language of their own, but the description of this other tongue was added to the typescript that followed the manuscript at some later time. Their account of the Southrons scarcely differs from the final form, but where Mablung in the Two Towers speaks of these cursed Barangils, for so we named them, subsequently changed to the later reading, the name Barangils is written in the first map beside Sweartings. Okay, so one really small point, but one that interested me very much. Rangers. The use of the word rangers, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about rangers, and we've seen the development of the word rangers in a couple different directions, right? Back with Trotter in Bree. And yes, Stephen, that's the thing, right? Exactly. it's a name they give for themselves. They call themselves Rangers, right? We're Rangers of Ithilien, for we're descended from folk who lived in Ithilien at one time before it was overrun, right? Now, that is kept in the final text, but that is the phrase Rangers of Ithilien, right? But it's not them who use that in the final text. It's Frodo and Sam in their own minds, right? They are realizing that they're Rangers of Ithilien, because now to them, right, post the conversation with Gandalf in Rivendell, right, in many meetings at the beginning of book 2, when Frodo realizes, when Gandalf says that's just what the Rangers are, right, the last remnant in the north of the, of the great men, then, now Ranger equals Númenórean in Frodo's mind, right? So when he sees them, when he's listening to Damrod and Mablung and hearing them talk and realizes that they're speaking Elvish, and this is the published text I'm talking about now, and realizes that they're speaking Elvish, he's like, oh, they're Rangers. They're Rangers of Ithilien, right? But again, that's because he has now redefined the word Ranger in his mind. It's inconsistent, actually. So Tolkien's initial usage here, where they themselves introduce themselves as Rangers, makes no sense unless he's going to totally change what happened back in Bree, right? Ranger was a pejorative term used in the Bree land of the Númenóreans, right? Not a name that they developed for themselves, or certainly anything that would have communicated itself and been adopted by folks down here. So that seems an inconsistency, which clearly he irons out as he moves forward. But okay, so thinking about the story, then again, here as we're looking at the development of the Ithilien story, this is the question that is to me always so interesting, as I was saying before. Like, what is the germ of it? What is the core of it? What is it like, when he introduces this other scene? Okay, I'm trying to avoid saying, why does he do that? Because when I say why, it makes it sound like we're trying to guess like what he was thinking and what exactly his intention and motivation was, and we can't know that. So that's not what I mean. Like I was saying about the rabbit story, like what does he emphasize? What is the core of that story? What is happening there? What does it accomplish? So the initial one, we are just witnesses and nearly, caught up in, right, the battle, but we become mere spectators of the battle after we escape and climb up a tree. The core of that story seems to be, as I was suggesting, at least my conclusion about that, is that, again, we're seeing war breaking out all around them, and the conflict is beginning, and they're at risk of getting caught up in it. When he chooses to make it personal, and for them to be captured first, and to be guarded, by Mablung and Damrod, and then for them to meet the captain, Falborn, son of Anborn. What is the core of that story, right? What does that story become? From the spectator of the battle that happens nearby to being clearly affiliated, right? In that they are literally physically on the side of the Gondorians, right? They're behind the lines of the Gondorians, and they're being watched / guarded / imprisoned, right, by Mablung and Damrod, and then interrogated by Falborn, their captain. What's the center? Yes, Brandon asks, is Mablung someone named for someone in the Silmarillion at this stage? Yep, yeah, definitely. Mablung is definitely there. He's a relatively early character who actually has his own proper name, Mablung. He gets and keeps his name Mablung pretty early on in the process. So yes, Mablung is explicitly a Silmarillion reference there. Yes. But yeah, so no, this is not exactly a recycling name. This is different. This is an illusion, right? Within the frame of the story, it's an illusion. That is, the Gondorians know the story, of Mablung, of the Heavy Hand, and they named, so some Gondorian mother somewhere had a baby and said, I want to name him after Mablung, the servant of Thingol. Like, that happened, and they knew that they were doing that on purpose, right? So that's a different thing, Ollie, than we saw when he was just recycling material and concepts and names from the Silmarillion before. This is now part of the that firewall has come down a while ago, and this is part of how thoroughly now those stories are being connected here. Those legends of the First Age, we now are beginning to see more and more the consequences of the fact that the people in the story know them, right? And we see that here pretty quickly. Boomful, it's a lot like people using biblical names. Exactly. Yeah. No, that seems to be the whole concept there. And you're right. They do make great teasers for the Silmarillion. I agree. Of course, the Lord of the Rings is full of those, isn't it? But anyway, okay. But back to my question. My question is, what is the core of this new story, right? Having shifted it from merely a battle witnessed from a not quite perfectly safe distance, right? To now them being connected with the people and then meeting the captain afterwards. So the core is not to introduce Faramir, right? Because he's not Faramir, right? He has not discovered that yet. They're going to be captured by the Gondorians, so we're going to have them interact with the Gondorians, and they're going to be brought into danger, but it's going to be a very different kind of danger, right? You know, in the original version of it, when they're just witnessing the battle, they're in danger of getting caught up in the battle. They're in danger of getting mistaken for orcs and killed, apparently. They're in danger of getting, trampled, smothered by dead bodies. And, when you're a hobbit and a huge man comes, toppling over and his corpse falls on you, that's a big deal, right? People can get hurt that way. But yeah, Veronica, there's a pretty big danger that the Gondorians are going to get the ring. That conversation between Falborn, son of Anborn. I love, by the way, how Faramir's old father, Anborn, stays in the company, right? Of course, you'll remember he's the archer who is all ready to shoot Gollum. In the published text, Anborn is. So I love how his dad sticks around. It's raining men, says James Oakley. Yeah, it's not a hallelujah situation, though, right? Yeah, it's raining men has a completely different connotation in this context. That's really funny. Anyway, okay. So, but again, so what's the core? Yeah, the danger. So as Veronica says, now we have a direct challenge to the ring. So we get this much more complicated situation where they're not merely in physical danger. They're still in physical danger. The battle is near. If it goes badly for the Gondorians, what's going to happen to them, right? There's still, that's always on the table. But now they're with their allies, right? The Gondorians are their friends, but now they have to protect the ring. And Tolkien has created this situation in which now the ring and their quest are in very real danger. Notice how this is escalated, right? Notice how quickly this escalates. This was not, and that's the thing that I find so interesting about the fact that that element, the interaction with Falborn and the interrogation about the ring, is not in any way the centerpiece of the Ithilien story, right? In retrospect, right, from the published text, the meeting with Faramir, right? That's totally the center of the Ithilien story. But it wasn't initially. That's not where he doesn't start with saying, okay, on the way to Minas Morgul, let's give them an adventure where they the ring, it looks like the ring might be taken and they got to figure out what to do. Eventually he gets them there, but that's not what he set out to do. But now it's really serious and it's not obvious how they're going to get out of this, right? This could become a really uncomfortable situation. Remember, Tolkien painted himself in a corner once before when he had Frodo being captured and taken to Minas Morgul and Sam getting him out of Minas Morgul. and fighting his way through the Sentinels or the Silent Watchers, if that's what they were at that point. But then the Nazgul are showing up, because of course they would, right? When the alarm is sounded, and now what? And how do they escape? And then he never finished that, right? He never came back to that. He abandons that whole story, in large part, it seems, because he'd kind of painted himself into a corner. How can they get out? He was, like, one of them puts on the ring and runs away, but there's a Nazgul right there, and what does the other one do? And so, anyway, he got himself into trouble trying to figure out how to get out of that. It looks like there's a non-zero chance that this has escalated to a point where it's going to be challenging to figure that out as well. Good. Okay. And notice how we're already getting the linguistic stuff, right? He totally can't help himself. They speak sometimes in the common speech, but after the manner of older days, sometimes some other language of their own, but the description of this other tongue was added to the typescript that followed the manuscript at some later time. Because, of course, we have to describe their language. Obviously, right, you've got to describe their language. Remember, in the published text, he has restrained himself, right? The fact that they're speaking Elvish to themselves among themselves is a big deal. Right. And it's a big deal, of course, because Frodo's an elf friend. Right. And it's sort of, we know that they're not just like technically the political allies of the good guys. Right. But if they're speaking Elvish among themselves, that kind of tells you something about them, fairly significant. But Tolkien kind of refrains from linguistic comment, right, from philological comment on the Elvish of Mablung and Damrod there in the published text. That is not restraint concerning linguistic matters is not Tolkien's first impulse when he's writing these things, right? He does really indulge his philology interests here increasingly as he drafts. So anyway, so Christopher says, since it was not until a week later that he referred to the sudden and totally unexpected appearance of Faramir on the scene, it seems to me that when he wrote of the Oliphant episode, for in the manuscript of the chapter that became Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, the leader of the Gondorians is Falborn, not Faramir, and there is as yet no indication that he will play any further part. So through that whole sequence, the all the way through the interrogation and everything, I love the evidence that we get from the letters, right? Christopher is clearly relieved. The dating is made so easy through this section by those very detailed letters that his dad wrote to him, telling him exactly the dates on which he wrote what, and by telling him day by day, so today I got as far as this. And so, this is a great, piece of close reading of those letters by Christopher, that since first he describes the stewed rabbit and the Oliphant scene, right, in one letter, and then in the next letter says, oh my gosh, like this new character Faramir has appeared and he won't shut up, right? That's not Tolkien's exact words. It's not a direct quotation, but that's essentially what Tolkien says about him, right? But anyway, so Faramir, so that character of the captain and the interrogation, Faramir's role in the story, his initial role in the story, is invented before the character Faramir, is developed, right? He's not Faramir yet. There is a captain of the Gondorians who is not yet Faramir. He is not being introduced. The interrogation scene, I try to say again the same thing I'm trying to say in a different way. The purpose of the interrogation scene is not to introduce the character of the captain, right? It's not a setup for, not if I found it by the highway would I take it, right? It's not a setup for that. Because if you have a character who's going to say something like that and mean it, that's a big deal, right? It's not until he becomes Faramir that he's going to start talking like that. Initially, he's just doing the interrogation and he's just like, you've got to come quiet, right? He just arrests Frodo. He's not in himself a big deal. So what the initial impulse, the initial core of that story seems to be the danger to the ring, the danger of at least the pausing or the diverting of their journey. How are they going to get out of it? How are they going to escape? This is a danger to be overcome, not a mechanism for the introduction of a really awesome new character. Yeah, Stephen, it is kind of like that, isn't it? So basically, here's, if it helps, and it won't, but if it helps, you can think to yourself when you watch the Peter Jackson movies that it's actually Falborn that he's depicting there, right? Because it is, right? Falborn's going to capture him and he's going to take him to Minas Tirith, right? That's just what Falborn would do. So there you go. Okay. But speaking of the linguistic stuff, this was another thing I was really noticing throughout this chapter here. He turned and spoke, this is Sam, turned and spoke in Frodo's ear. "I could almost sleep on my legs, Mr. Frodo," he said, "and you've not had much yourself. But these men are friends, it seems. They seem to come from Boromir's country, all right. Though they don't quite trust us. I can't see any cause to doubt them. And we're done anyway if they turn nasty. So we'd best rest." By the way, I just love that rationale. That is totally, again, Sam is my hero in so many ways, right? There's nothing we can do. Right? There's nothing we can do. We're pretty much helpless here. If they're going to attack us, like, they're going to kill us whether we're paying attention or not, right? So why stinger? I'm just going to sleep. Since there's nothing I can do to resist it anyway, like, might as well get some rest, right? I love Sam's reaction. That's Hobbit sense, right? That is Hobbit sense in action right there. I think that and notice that's kind of a trend with Sam, right? Sam is the spokesperson of Hobbit sense pretty frequently, right? Yeah. Yana thinks it's curious that the ring isn't really brought up as a potential escape route here. Yeah. And Yana, I guess I would expand that a little bit to say it's interesting to me that in these outlines and sketches and things and early drafts that we're getting, almost nowhere in any of this material do we get glimpses into what Frodo is thinking or meaning or intending, or, like, is he being tempted by the ring? Does he want to do this or that? We get a bunch of Sam dialogue, right? A little bit of Frodo dialogue, but very little what was Frodo experiencing, what was Frodo thinking. And that's kind of interesting. Okay, anyway, so here's Sam's very pragmatic, I agree, Patricia, his very pragmatic reasoning here. "Sleep if thou wilt," said Mablung. "We will guard thee and thy master until Falborn comes. Falborn will return hither if he has saved his life, but when he cometh we must move swiftly. All this tumult will not go unmarked, and ere night is old we shall have many pursuers. We shall need all speed to gain the river first." Okay, archaic speech, right? Yeah, after the manner of old times, absolutely after the manner of old times. We get the very pronouncedly archaic speech of the Gondorians, right? And it's not just about the verb conjugation, right? It's not just about the thee and the thys and the cometh, right? It's not just about that. It's about the phrasing. It's about the word choice, right? If he has saved his life is, again, that's a very archaic way to express that. Like, if he makes it back alive, we might say, right? If he lives, if he has saved his life. All this tumult will not go unmarked, right? He's really getting into it, right? Interesting that his first impulse is to have a clearly audible difference between Hobbit talk and Gondorian talk, right? That difference in accent, difference in speech, which is still commented on numerous times, in the published text, right? Everyone notices that Pippin's speech is very strange compared to the way that everybody in Gondor talks, but we, the readers, don't hear it, right? There's a difference in diction, between Pippin's language and like Baragon's language, but nothing like this extreme. Gaining the river, Stephen. Yeah, that's another great example here. James, I think we did get auto-corrected, how it corrected thy to they there, the they master. Yeah, I think so. But see, again, it's just kind of drawing attention to it, right? Anyway, what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, so the difference is not primarily one of accents. It's one of formalism and archaism of speech. But also notice, I can't help but think that though they don't quite trust us, I can't see any cause to doubt them, and we're done anyway if they turn nasty, so we'd best rest. Sam's language seems kind of aggressively Samwise, right? Kind of aggressively hobbitish, aggressively kind of bumpkinish, right? In this in that speech. Which seems to me just to strongly emphasize the difference in the register of their words here. Though they don't quite trust us, straight to "we will guard thee and thy master until Falborn comes." Right? That's you can hurt your neck, right? Whipping from one to the other, right there. Notice that this is gonna sort of level out, right? We're not going to see him turn explicitly away from this. The speech of the Gondorians throughout these drafts is still more elevated, I think, by and large, than the published text. But as he revises, as he moves forward, it starts to kind of come closer and closer, less and less overtly archaic. We lose the haths and the thy and the comeths pretty quickly, right? And then the sentence structure and the syntax modernizes too as we move forward. Still not very modern, still different from Sam's, but nothing like that first speech. Okay, now here is Frodo near the pitch of danger, right? This seems to be what this whole scene has been building up to. This whole, why have we had them captured? Why, what is the outcome of the conversation with Falborn? Here we come. But the words said, "with Isildur's bane in hand," said Falborn. "If you are the half-high, then you should have that thing in hand, whatever it might be. Have you it not? Or is it hidden because you choose to hide it?" "Were Boromir here, he would answer your question," said Frodo, "and since Boromir was many days ago at Rauros on the way to your city, if you return swiftly, you will learn the answer." By the way, I love that line, "if you return swiftly," right? If you get going right now, in fact, you should run. Go, right? I love the subtext of Frodo, right? Leave me alone right away, right? Anyway, "if you return swiftly, you will learn the answer. My part in this company was known to him and to all, and to Lord Elrond indeed. The errand given to me brings me into this land, and it is not wise that any enemy of the Dark Lord should hinder it." "I see there is more in this than I first perceived," said Falborn. "But I too am under command. To slay or take prisoner, as reason justifies, all found in Ithilien. There is no cause to slay thee." Okay, so again, notice we see the tight place, right, that Frodo is put in. On the one hand, he's coming off pretty well. I agree, Mike. He's firm. He makes a good speech. He makes a good return to Falborn here in this passage, and yet, what can he do? And notice Falborn's hands are tied much more. He is not the captain general, right? He is not the son of the steward. He is not the captain of the armies of Minas Tirith. He does not have the same authority that Faramir will eventually have, right? And so he says he is under command, right? He's a captain. He's an officer, right? But he's got a chain of command that he's got to answer to, and he's got his marching orders to slay or take prisoner as reason justifies, all found in Ithilien. I've got two choices, right? And we end with, there is no cause to slay thee, right? So Falborn is not going to be terribly stubborn, right? He's not just going to insist on having them killed. Tolkien isn't ratcheting the danger up to that level, right? Where he's not going to set up an execution scene and have, Gollum come running in and rescuing them from the gallows or something like that. Like, he's not going that direction. He does have Falborn be, tough but fair, right? And to have him to show justice, sort of tinged with mercy here to Frodo. But what can Falborn do? Right? I mean, this is the end of this particular draft, and again, you can sort of see he's a little bit stuck here. Jennifer, that's interesting. Jennifer Pope says she finds it strange that the people who know the poem, right, who clearly know the verse, assume that Frodo's carrying the Bane around with him. Obviously, he had it in Imladris, but why assume he still has it now, right? That is a sort of a charmingly simplistic interpretation of that line, the first one that he comes to. If you were the half-high, then you should have that thing in your hand. It's almost like you're expecting him to say, like, open up your hand, it's there, right? Like, obviously you carry it around in your hand at all times. But he then sort of moves off from that. Like, do you have you it not? Or is it hidden because you choose to hide it? At least you should know of it, right? But Jennifer, it's one of my favorite elements of this. Notice, and I didn't quote all of these, but in several of the different versions of this scene that Tolkien did, because of course he did a whole bunch of versions, apparently all within a week of each other. But anyway, the different versions that he did, we can see. I love the evidence that Tolkien is revising the poem. And that's the coolest thing, right? So Falborn is quoting half of one line of the poem. But each time Tolkien drafts it, the half line is different, right? With Isildur's Bane in hand, and then there's at least 3 different versions of that line, and of course Falborn's dialogue has to be adapted to what the actual line is. But of course, that line is key because it's part of the rhyming structure of the whole poem. So it's fairly clear that as he's quoting it, as Tolkien quotes the poem, the quoting of the poem is leading him to rethink the line. So it's like with Isildur's Bane, I don't like Isildur's Bane in hand, right? So I've got to go back and rewrite that poem, and then he rewrites it and he incorporates the new version, and then he doesn't like that one, and he's got to go back and rewrite the poem again, and we see him change that. I really love that. Kate, that's a really great thought. Kate says that this character Falborn, in terms of position, is in a sense, even of course, like he is playing the role that Faramir is eventually going to play, and indeed he is delivering many of the lines that Faramir is going to deliver. But really, in terms of his role in the story, he's more of a forerunner of Baragond, right? And I agree with that, Kate. I think that we can see, it does seem that the germ of that particular story nugget, right? Boy, talk about mixed metaphors. You can't have a germ of a nugget, can you? Anyway, the germ of that particular story plant, right? Story flower, is the story of the faithful soldier with divided loyalties, right? Having to decide, does he follow orders, or does he do the right thing, which means breaking orders and doing what seems like the wrong thing. That whole concept of the division of loyalties and yeah, the problem that Baragon is going to, obviously it's not exactly the same, but the core concept of that seems to be lurking around in Falborn's future, right? Because I can only see two. I mean, maybe I'm just not thinking creatively enough, but I can only think of two ready ways of getting Frodo and Sam out of this tight spot that Tolkien has put them in with Falborn here. One is for Falborn to relent, right? Falborn would just have to be talked around to letting them go. So how's that going to happen? That's going to take some doing, right? And the other alternative is for them to escape or to be rescued, right? Those seem to me really kind of the two options. Okay. Back to another version of the so Tolkien does another draft of the debate. I love this line. I remember that he bore a horn, he said at last, of Boromir obviously. Thou rememberest well, as one who hath verily seen him, said Falborn. Notice we're still archaic. Then maybe thou canst see it in thy mind's eye. A great horn of the wild ox of the eastern wilderness, changed to a wild ox of the east, bound with silver, and written with his name, struck out, worn upon a silver chain. Notice that? Oh, that's so cool, isn't it? He doesn't want Boromir's name on it, right? Because he decides probably that he wants it to be hereditary, right? Passed down from generation to generation. So he's worn upon a silver chain. But notice how that bound with silver and written with his name, changed to bound with silver, worn upon a silver chain. Notice how it almost scans the same and practically rhymes, right? He wants a sentence that sounds almost... That's kind of cool. Anyway, that horn the waters of Anduin brought unto us, maybe changed to, brought unto us more than 7 nights now gone. An ill token we thought it, and boding little joy to Denethor, father of Boromir. For the horn was cloven in twain as by sword or axe. The halves of it came severally to shore. Falborn's account of how the pieces of the horn were found now follows as in the Two Towers, ending, but murder will out, 'tis said. Then he continues, Dost thou not know of the cleaving of the horn, or who cast it over Rauros, to drown it forever in the eddies of the fall, doubtless? No, said Frodo, I do not know, but none of our company has the will for such a deed, and none the strength, unless it were Aragorn. But though it may be a token of ill, a cloven horn does not prove the wearer's death. So Frodo was doing really well in the other draft, standing up to be. This is, I think that if Frodo had a defense attorney, his defense attorney would be telling him to shut up now, right? You're over talking here, Frodo. Yeah. So. Yeah. I know he doesn't actually mean to throw Aragorn under the bus, right? But doesn't it kind of sound like he's suggesting Aragorn as a suspect, right? I couldn't have killed Boromir. You should be bringing Aragorn in for questioning, totally, because he's the only one of us who could possibly have done it. Yeah. One other thing that I notice here. Notice how Frodo is echoing. Not exactly, like he's not adopting the full archaism of Falborn's words here, but he is not speaking like his normal self, right? He is echoing back to he is speaking to Falborn in deliberately formalized terms. He conjugates his verbs and his pronouns and his verbs are his normal pronouns and verbs, but his syntax is like Falborn's syntax, right? None of our company has the will for such a deed, and none the strength, right? That's like the kind of syntax that Falborn might use. Though it may be a token of ill, a cloven horn does not prove the wearer's death. That too is a very archaic structure there. Yeah. But and I love Falborn's suggestion that the reason the horn pieces came to light is that somebody chucked him over Rauros in order to hide the evidence, right? He's clearly got this scripted in his mind, right? The irony of the thing, right? They probably chucked the cloven horn in order to hide their vile deed, and yet the very action that they took in order to conceal their deed is what has revealed them. That's classic, right? Murder will out. There's a Canterbury Tale about murder will out, right? That was a famous Middle English saying. That is it is used twice in the Canterbury Tales. Sharon, you're right. It's one of the few direct Chaucer quotes that we get in the Lord of the Rings. And notice that Falborn, and Faramir after him are quoting it as a proverb, right? It's a traditional saying, inherited from bygone days, right? So murder will out. And the concept, murder will out, that is a supernatural thing, right? This is not sooner or later we'll find you. This is not what you're going to do when they come for you, right? This is supernaturally. Murder is hateful to God, and murder will be revealed. Supernatural portents often accompanied murder in medieval stories. For instance, one very common thing is that one way in which you could tell the murderer, often when a murderer and when the murderer enters the room where the corpse of his victim is lying, the corpse's wounds will begin to bleed afresh in the presence of the murderer. Murder will out. It just happens. And then of course you have like other examples of like corpses speaking and identifying their murderers. And yeah, Hamlet is exactly playing off of that, right? The character Hamlet is trying to get Claudio to betray himself, because what he's playing on is not just sort of Claudio's own sense of guilt, but or Claudius's, not Claudio, that's a different Shakespeare character, Claudius's sense of guilt. But it's not just his sense of guilt in like the modern sense, or even in Stephen, like the Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe kind of way, but rather within that medieval Renaissance worldview, a murderer has every reason to suspect that his victim is actually there's going to be a supernatural portent, as indeed there is, right? The ghost of Hamlet's father is the kind of thing that happens, right? When the victim comes back and his shade appears. And remember Gorlim, right? Gorlim, it's a different situation. It's not a murder. I mean, of course, Gorlim was murdered, but it's not exactly that. But anyway, it's like that, right? Again, the idea of like the unquiet spirit of he who is murdered. That's another way in which murder often comes out. In other words, when Falborn says murder will out, what he is saying is, see, the shards of the two halves of the horn were discovered. That was, if not miraculous, at least deliberately providential. Uh-oh. Sorry. Hope my power doesn't go out. It's a very windy day here. Are you guys still hearing me? Am I coming through okay here? Okay. Good. Sorry. Some very serious brownout action happening with my power here. Okay. Good. All right. Tell me if you can't hear me anymore. Whew. Okay, let me hurry up. Okay, so he is bringing this forward as evidence of a supernatural intervention to reveal the murderers, which is why it is so. That's why he's bringing it forward to Frodo, right? Because this seems like just how it sort of is supposed to work, right? Miraculous clues are supposed to be emerging, like just so as to convict the suspect who will be revealed, and Frodo seems to fit that bill, right? So from a kind of medieval point of view, Falborn is being an excellent prosecution barrister here, Frodo not putting up a particularly good defense here. Yeah. And Veronica, no, they don't consider that Boromir may have died in battle. It's interesting, isn't it, that that doesn't seem to occur to them? And someone was asking about this earlier. The halves of it came severally to shore. That's a lovely word, a lovely archaic usage. Severally is an excellent adverb, which just means if they come severally to shore, it means they didn't come together, right? They came at different times and in different places. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. The account of the boat bearing the body of Boromir is for most of its length very close indeed to that in the Two Towers, and it is here most curiously that Falborn becomes Boromir's brother, though he does not change his name. It was Boromir, my brother, dead. It is as if he slipped without conscious decision, that is, Tolkien, not Falborn or Boromir. It is as if he slipped without conscious decision into the role that had been, it is Falborn, that had been preparing for him. What else could he be, this captain of Gondor, so concerned with Frodo's story and the fate of Boromir, right? His relationship with Boromir emerges spontaneously, right? This is one of those wonderful examples of like a character says something. You can almost hear Tolkien. You can almost see Tolkien, right? He writes that sentence. It was Boromir, my brother, dead. And then he's kind of like, oh, Falborn is Boromir's brother. Oh, well, that's good to know, right? It's hard to remember any other passage in these drafts where we see him discover something in mid-flow more suddenly, right? More directly. Yana, I do believe that they are assuming that Boromir is too awesome to be killed in combat, so it must be treachery. Yes, and I think that we can hear a sort of a remnant of that concept. In Denethor's words in The Return of the King, when he says to Pippin, when he's getting Pippin to tell his story, right? Him so mighty a man and only orcs to withstand him, right? As if orcs could kill Boromir. Come on now, right? Doesn't matter how many orcs there were, right? And only orcs to withstand him. So yeah, I do think that's exactly what they're thinking. Obviously, Boromir couldn't have been killed in battle. That's totally implausible. And so therefore, he must have been treacherously stabbed. And there are probably wounds like in the back of his mighty knee. And that's how you can tell it was these little runtish half-high that did him in. Okay, so Falborn becomes Boromir's brother at the moment of this vision. So think about that for a second. It is in the recounting of the vision of his vision of the boat, right? Of Boromir's corpse laid out in the boat full of water. It is that moment which leads Tolkien to discover that Falborn is actually Boromir's brother. And that gives to me, it gives an even deeper poignancy to that moment when I think about Faramir in the published text describing that, right? That there are lots of, again, I thinking in those same terms that I've been using, right? Like, what is the core of that story? What is the center? What is the main purpose of that story? The main core, the heart of the vision of dead Boromir in the boat story element, right? The heart of that element is not mysterious vision from beyond the grave, right? It's not a portent. It's not as a sign of doom. It is that moment of intimacy, right? It is that moment of the revelation to near kin, right? The encounter the opportunity that Faramir is given to say goodbye to his dead brother, right? That's the core of the story. So close to the core, so much at the heart of that moment that the relationship itself is revealed by that vision. Okay, anyway, going on. The boat turned into the stream. The boat turned into the stream and passed into the night. Others saw it, some near at hand, others from far off, but none dare touch it, nor maybe would even the evil hands of those that hold Osgiliath dare to hinder it. This I thought was a vision, though one of evil boding, and even when I heard the tale of others we doubted, Denethor my father and I, if it were more, though it boded evil. But none can doubt the horn. It lies now cloven in twain upon the lap of Denethor, and messengers ride far and wide to learn news of Boromir. Cloven in twain, by the way, that's one of my favorite Sir Thomas Malory phrases. That is straight out of Le Morte Arthur. Things get cloven in twain a lot in Malory. Normally, of course, it's people's helmets that get cloven in twain, but still, ever since I was in high school and first read Malory, have always associated the word cloven with the word twain in that way. Cloven and twain that's classic. Anyway, just like rent asunder are two words that I like. I can't like. Would you use the word asunder with anything other than rent? Right? I wouldn't. Anyway, so others saw it, right? It wasn't just to him that this vision came, even though, again, the core of that vision is the intimacy and the revelation of their close relationship. It is seen by others. We get it vouched for, so that Falborn, as he still is, has reason to believe that this was a real vision, right? That this was a legitimate thing, and not just a lying vision that he saw. And that none dare touch it. Even the evil hands of those that hold Osgiliath would not dare to hinder it. That's a nice touch. That, of course, is not in the published text. Okay. Back to the interview. Right, back to the trial of Frodo here with Falborn. Well, said Falborn, if thou wilt have dealings with the mistress of magic that somethingeth, I love that. It ends with eth, but I'm not sure what the verb is, right? That somethingeth, added dwells, abideth, would be my guess. But who knows? In the Golden Wood, goodness knows Christopher Tolkien is better at interpreting Tolkien's rapid scrawl than I am. That something eth in the Golden Wood, then they must look for strange things and evil things to follow. This was too much for Sam's patience. He stood up and walked into the debate. Not evil from Lorien, he said. Begging your pardon, Mr. Frodo, he said, but I have been listening to a deal of this talk. Let's come to the point before all the orcs of Mordor come down on us. Now look here, Falborn of Gondor, if that is your name. The men looked in amazement, not in merriment, at the small something hobbit planted firmly on his feet before the seated figure of the captain. What are you getting at? If you think we murdered your brother and then ran away, say so, and say what you mean to do about it. The delightful fact that Sam leaps up and defies Falborn to his face comes not when he's accusing Frodo of stabbing Boromir in the back. Frodo is perfectly capable of defending himself, right? But when he speaks evil of the elves, right? Forget about that. Sam jumps up. Not evil from Lorien. I've been listening to a deal of this talk, right? Sam has had enough. He's fed up. And this is really cool. But again, that's a major difference, right, from the published text, that it's the elves that he comes in and he just can't he just can't handle that. Oh yeah, the other thing, of course, that I was gonna mention there, which of course was not ironic at the time, but of course in retrospect is deliciously ironic. Falborn of Gondor, if that is your name, which of course it isn't, right? It turns out his real name is Faramir. So Sam somehow knew that Falborn wasn't actually his real name, which is great. But again, notice how Falborn does not metamorphose into Faramir right away, right? That moment when Tolkien realizes that Falborn is Boromir's brother, he doesn't become Book Faramir immediately, right? He's now Boromir's brother, but everything else about him seems to be still pretty much the same, right? He still speaks like a common soldier might speak, like the Rohirrim speak. He doesn't have any wizardly or elvish wisdom that we see that is so striking about Faramir, right? He is not yet different in those ways. There isn't that sense of sort of greatness of insight, greatness of mind that Faramir is going to eventually have. He doesn't get that right away. So Falborn, the captain, who puts Frodo in the tight place, and now we have to figure out what's going to happen with Frodo, and is Falborn going to find out about the ring? Is he going to try to take the ring? Tune in next time, right? That's where we were leading up to in this scene. Now, wait, Falborn is Boromir's brother. That changes things, but notice what it changes is it ratchets up their danger, right? More is at stake in this trial now. This is not just, you killed Boromir, our captain general, right? That's bad enough, right? You killed my brother. That is serious business, right? You don't want to be up on a murder trial before a judge when it's the judge's own brother who is the victim in the case, right? That is not good. I mean, Sam's words there, if you think we murdered your brother and then ran away, say so, and say what you mean to do about it. You know, Sam's direct challenge really lays it out, right? Is this going to be a vengeance thing? Are you looking for a weregild? Are you wanting to take it out? Are you going to take vengeance on us because you think we killed your brother? It's definitely a big deal here, right? And yes, Bruce, the fact that Boromir tried to take the ring from Frodo, obviously, if anything, the initial link to Boromir, right, the family link to Boromir, is troubling. If anything, it fits, right? It fits into this. So okay, great. You escape Boromir, and now you've been captured by his brother, and you're in a worse spot than you were before. At least when Boromir cornered you, the two of you were alone, and you could give him the slip, right? Whether it is exactly Matthew, whether it's an Inigo Montoya situation, or whether this is, Boromir Part 2, The Revenge, what we still have is Frodo in danger, very pointed danger, very, very serious danger, danger of his life, but also direct danger of the quest and of the ring. So, in other words, the changing to Boromir's brother has only intensified the initial dynamic of that scene. It's not yet really changed the story or transformed Falborn's character. As you can tell, he still has his name. And Brianna, I agree with you. It is almost as if having put that line, if that is your name, into Sam's mouth, right? It's almost like Tolkien, once he writes that, he can't unhear it, right? If that's his name. Wait, is it his name? Actually, no. Turns out it isn't. Okay. Skipping ahead here. I love Christopher's comment here on the two halves of the story. Here, this third phase of drafting C ends. It is curious that in the completed manuscript, Sam's intervention has entirely disappeared. The dialogue between Faramir and Frodo in the passage where it originally took place now reaches the form in the Two Towers, and Faramir no longer expressed so conventional a view of the Lady of the Golden Wood. So that seems to be why Sam's intervention entirely disappeared, right? It disappeared because Tolkien decided to make Faramir his name has changed now in this draft. So he's decided to make Faramir not speak evil of the Lady of the Woods. So there's no reason for Sam to intervene, right? But of course, he's Tolkien, right? So Tolkien never throws away anything that ends up on the cutting room floor. It is in his. He doesn't have a cutting room floor, right? He has a careful cutting room tray, right, in like a drawer right there in his desk, so that it's always ready for him to pull out whatever he cut before to use again. So Sam's interruption is going to come back and get placed earlier on, right? So that makes a fair bit of sense. But the point, of course, that Christopher is making here is that the entire first part of the story, right to the end of the interview, right, the end of the trial, that gets written and rewritten and rewritten and revised until it is almost word for word exactly the form in the Two Towers, with just that one exception. It's exactly the form before anything else was written, right? Before Henneth Anun was even a concept, before any of their later conversation was mapped out, he had no idea where the Faramir story was going before he had totally perfected and revised this first half, the trial scene, right? So that's pretty cool. Yana said, does that mean Odo will even still come back, right? Well, can't rule it out, right? At least Odo, you have to admit, Odo put up a pretty good fight. Anyway, okay. Let's keep going. It is plain, I think, that at this point, at Frodo's words, "Go back, Faramir, valiant captain, and defend your city while you may, and let me alone where my doom takes me," the writing of the manuscript was halved, and at that time, nothing further had been written. In other words, this chapter, in terms of composition, falls into two parts. All up to this point, apart from the absence of Sam's outburst, having been brought virtually to the final form before the story proceeded. So again, thinking in those terms that I've been trying to push here tonight, what is the core of this story, right? The core, so that this danger to the ring, this threat to Frodo, this I've been cornered by the brother of Boromir who might end up being worse even than Boromir was. Certainly I'm in a worse place than I was when I was cornered by Boromir. That's the core of this first story. Now, the whole second part. After this, how is that going to change the story, right? How is that going to develop? Because that's the next stage. And I know that seems like an obvious thing. Yes, what comes next is the next stage, right? But of course, as we see so many times before, what's going to come next is going to totally transform what happened in this earlier scene, right? And Faramir, of course, is going to become a quite different person. So, what happens? Where do we go? What happens next? Very rough and here and there altogether illegible outline sketches show my father's preliminary thoughts for its continuation. One of these, impossibly difficult to read, begins at the point where the draft C ends, with Faramir still speaking to Sam. But you have not the manners of orcs, nor their speech, and indeed Frodo your master has an air that I cannot something or other, an elvish air, maybe. In this text, Faramir shows no hesitation about his course, and does not postpone his decision, but concludes sternly, "You shall be well treated, but make no doubt of it. Until my father Denethor releases you, you are prisoners of Gondor. Do not try to escape, if you do not wish to be slain." Then follows, in a few minutes they were on their way again down the slopes. Hobbits tired, Mablung carries Sam. They get to the fenced camp in a dense wood of trees 10 miles away. They had not gone far before Sam suddenly said to Frodo, "Gollum! Well, thank heavens we've lost him." But Frodo not so sure. "We have still to get into Mordor," he said, "and we do not know the way." Gollum rescues them. The last 3 words are very unclear, but I have no doubt that this is what they are, though what story lay behind them will never be known. Okay, so first impulse, right? As Tolkien goes on to continue this story, what do we see? Well, what we see is that he's going to continue telling the same story. Initially, the following action does not change the earlier story, right? What we get is the final closing of the trap, right? What is the end of the trial? The end of the trial is their incarceration, right? You are prisoners of Gondor. Do not try to escape if you do not wish to be slain. So Faramir is going to be firm. He's not going to like chop off their heads on the spot or anything, but he is going to hold them prisoner, right? So them in a tight place. What happens? How are they going to escape? Faramir's not going to let them go. Gollum is going to rescue them, right? Remember that the initial core of the stewed rabbit scene seemed to be primarily interested in the three-way dynamic between Sam, Frodo, and Gollum, right? Or at least Sam's relationship with Gollum and Frodo's relationship with Gollum sort of contrasted, right? This potentially seems to be a further development of that. Notice we get Sam's comment on Gollum. Thank heavens we've lost him. And then we get Frodo's response. We still need him. We need to get into Mordor and we don't know the way, right? So don't be so hasty about being glad to get rid of Gollum. And then Gollum is going to rescue them, right? Which of course is going to then set up another really interesting set of dynamics there. We have no idea how that was going to happen or what was going to go on. But again, remember, this is logical, right? This is perfectly logical. He has put them in danger, in a tight place, and now he somehow needs to extract them. And I think actually this could have been, I think that this could have been really interesting, right? Now, I do agree, Ariel, that it would have been tricky, right? Ariel says she has a hard time believing Gollum would be capable of making a rescue against the Rangers. Totally fair, right? It's hard to see how it could be managed by Gollum, but, he's very cunning, so maybe he could pull it off. But again, I kind of like the idea, actually. Thinking about what's this going to do to Sam's relationship with Gollum, and think of like the additional gratitude that they're going to owe to Gollum, how Gollum will have won their trust by staying faithful to them and rescuing them at risk of his own neck. But of course, it's right before he's about to betray them. So that makes sort of the turnaround more extreme there. I don't know. I mean, I think that could have been handled pretty well, actually. But anyway, as I say, we've got the same story. Then we get the shift, right? But you must know, says Faramir to them, but you must know that much is known in Minas Tirith that is not spoken aloud. Therefore I dismissed my men. Gandalf was here. We, the rulers, know that Isildur carried off the ruling ring. Now this is a terrible matter. I can well guess that Boromir, proud, ever anxious for the glory of Minas Tirith and his own renown, might wish to seize it. I guess that you have the ring, though how it could... something or other. The rest of the sentence is illegible. The brief sketch ends with Faramir's words, I would not touch it if it lay by the highway, and his expression of his love for and desires for Minas Tirith. The last words are, I could advise you if you would tell me more. It is a pity that the passage about the ring is so brief and elliptical, but the implication must surely be that the rulers of the city knew that Isildur carried off the ruling ring because Gandalf had told them. This, of course, was not at all the way in which the story would unfold when it came to be written down. Yes, neither element of it, of course, neither what Gandalf tells whom and when, or, of course, Faramir just knowing that obviously the Ring of Power was taken from Sauron by Isildur. Remember, that's a surprise to Boromir. In the published text, that's a surprise to Boromir at the Council of Elrond, and Faramir is near but not in the gold, right? He figures there was something of Sauron's that was taken by Isildur, but he doesn't know that it was the ruling ring. Anyway, so the story begins to change. The whole story of, the hobbits and the Gondorians, the Gondorian Rangers, that story begins to shift from just a Frodo and the Ring are in danger story. And of course, Faramir's character begins to shift at the moment that he knows or finds out that he has the ring. Which is another really interesting moment, isn't it? Another really interesting moment of discovery. Because remember, in a sense, this is just the extension, the logical extension of the story he'd been telling. It's like he takes this story, he takes this concept and he pushes it and pushes it and pushes it, and then he pushes it one step further, and the one step further that he pushes it completely alters everything, right? Here's Frodo being interrogated about, being the half-high from the, who's supposed to be holding Isildur's bane in his hand, right? He's being interrogated about, suspected of murdering Boromir. He's imprisoned, right? He's going to be incarcerated and he's going to be hauled off to Gondor, and if he tries to escape, he's going to be killed. What's the final level of danger, right? The final level of danger is Faramir, the captain, discovers that he has the Ring of Power, right? Push finally comes to shove, and the ring is revealed, and everything comes to a crisis. And when it happens, Tolkien discovers that Faramir actually wouldn't take the ring, right? Faramir, we have no reason to believe that Foulborn and then Faramir is not like Boromir's mini-me, right? Until he finds out that he's the ring, and then as soon as Faramir finds out that Frodo has the ring, he becomes a different character, right? Tolkien discovers, actually, no, this guy wouldn't take it. This guy is not like his brother, and we can see from his own words about Boromir, he did not speak of Boromir this way before, right? Proud, ever anxious for the glory of Minas Tirith and his own renown. This is different, right? Because Faramir is different. It's the moment that Tolkien has discovered that. Frodo does not say more. Something holds him back. Wisdom? Memory of Boromir? Fear of the power and treachery of what he carried in spite of liking Faramir? They speak of other things. Reasons of decline of Gondor. Rohan. Alter Boromir's words, saying he did not go there. I love these moments where he's like, oops, got to retcon that, right? I forgot, Boromir said earlier on that he didn't go to Rohan. Yeah, now I want to make him go to Rohan. So I got to, note to self, go back and change that. Gondor gets like Rohan, loving war as a game. So Boromir. Sam says little. Delighted that Gollum seems forgotten. Faramir falls silent. Sam speaks of elvish power, boats, ropes, cloaks. Suddenly aware that Gollum is padding behind, but when they halt, he sheers off. Faramir, in accord with law, makes them be blindfolded as they reach secret stronghold. They talk. Faramir warns against Gollum. Frodo reveals that he has to go to Mordor, speaks of Minas Ithil. Moonrise. Faramir bids farewell in mourning. Frodo promises to come back to Minas Tirith and surrender to him if he returns. The new Faramir would totally let Frodo go, right? That is now the clear resolution. We don't get the wild rescue by Gollum, however that was going to be managed. Instead, we have this Faramir, clearly. This Faramir would let him go, right? A Faramir who would resist the lure of the ring would choose to let Frodo go. Notice the next thing, and I'll let you guys go after this. It's starting to get late here. We didn't get quite to the end of my passages today, but that's okay. Being behind is what we do. Yeah, Jennifer, good. Faramir already knows everything, so we don't get the oops moment for Sam, right? Sam doesn't have to betray anything because Faramir already knows it. Anyway, what was I going to say? Got distracted there. Lost my train of thought. Totally. Warning against Gollum. Was that what I was just about to talk about? Sorry. Usually I don't lose my train of thought quite so completely as that, but it's completely gone. Okay, no, I remember now. The new Faramir, right? So we've peaceably resolved the situation. So we had, remember, like as the whole story of the Gondorians and the Haradrim from the very first time they appeared was like dangerous incident, right? Near escape. And then increased danger and increased danger and increased danger until it looked almost hopeless. We're going to have to bring Gollum in for a Wild West escape there. And now when he's discovered suddenly that Faramir's character is not like that, all of a sudden it's like the danger just vanishes, right? And what becomes the core of the story? Now the core of the story is this is no longer a hairbreadth escape story. This is no longer the ring is in peril. How are they going to escape the peril? Story anymore, right? What does it become? Dialogue, right? Faramir now keeps talking. It's become a lore moment. And Faramir begins to, now we're talking about what Gondor is like, right? We have the memory of the greater Gondor that is now diminishing. Why? Because Faramir is now greater, right? Having discovered that Faramir is different than Boromir, and in this sense more than Boromir. We have this through Faramir, the discovery of the greatness of Gondor itself. Remember, Gondor is powerful, but it's not all that, right? It was the city that was built by Elendil and the heirs of Elendil, but remember, they kind of kicked the heirs of Elendil out. I mean, it was the modern day Gondor was always going to be just a pale shadow, right? And tragic in the sense of they did something stupid and they're suffering for it now, but not tragic in that sort of classical Tolkienian way, that sense of just like inevitable loss over time, right? As time goes on, and the glory and the wisdom of the older days is passing. That becomes the message of Faramir's conversation, and the conversation, right? The conversation of Faramir expands and expands, and the vision, having discovered the new Faramir, through the new Faramir, Tolkien discovers Gondor, right? And we get Gondor really for the first time. This sense of Gondor begins to come into focus as a really interesting culture and as this really big part of the world of Middle Earth, right? Through Faramir and through this conversation here. All right, we'll come back and look at some of those as Faramir's conversation grows and grows and grows. We'll come back to some of this stuff. So we achieved my goal. My goal is to make sure we got through the transformation of Faramir, right? When the true Faramir finally springs his ambush and jumps out of the bushes and Tolkien sees him for the first time, right? That has finally happened. And yeah. Oh, James, and you're absolutely right. Through contrast, Rohan as well, right? That the nature of the culture of Rohan comes into focus here as well. This conversation is obviously, this is a huge world building moment for Tolkien, right? So we will look at some of that world building stuff at the beginning of next time, and then we'll move on. We should, again, be okay next week. I look forward to being back with you guys next week. I'll be starting to come up on another deadline there soon, but at least I won't be having a meeting that day, so it should be fine. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining me. Again, see you guys next.
The Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at Signum University.